When Quantum's available, it rips through that encryption and turns it all into plain text. So now we'll see banking information, we'll see critical information, we'll see secrets and passwords, and everything else is now available in clear text. That is horrifying. That is true technical Armageddon. That's a lot scarier than Mythos showing up. When my browser spins up a connection to a server somewhere else at a quantum encrypt level, the idea that you're going to get in the middle of that stream, break it at line speed, look inside of it, close it back again, and send it on its way just doesn't measure up to common sense. So what does every large network maker do next?
Hi everybody, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining another episode of the Boardroom Club. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and I'm joining also by a good friend of mine, Senat Muli. Senat.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today on the Boardroom Club. Super excited to have you.
So today we are fortunate enough to interview none other than Mike Fey, indeed, co-founder and CEO of Island, a company that redefining the enterprise browser category and transforming our organization secure and manage work in the modern digital workforce. Island has raised a total of $730 million and most recently at almost $5 billion valuation. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Mike, we already hosted Dan about a year ago, and obviously we talked about you guys being the leading actor in the enterprise browser category. But I guess in the last year, there's been a lot of newcomers and competition, like, of course, Microsoft, even Checkpoints and company like OpenAI saying that they want to enter the space as well. So I guess how does Island stay ahead of this high stakes game?
Well, I think each of those companies you mentioned are kind of taking a different view of what they want to do. And some want to be an extension in a browser. Some have a need to have their own. It doesn't matter. When we built the browser, we had a browser in the first 2 weeks of our existence. Having a browser doesn't mean a lot. That's easy to do on a Chromium open source project. It's the 200 engineers plus that have been building DLP, networking, credential management, digital experience, anti-tampering. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So as we see these new incumbents, in many cases, like in the OpenAI case, we'll make sure our platform supports them. We'll make them better. Great. From the competitive cybersecurity guys, we've never believed a secure browser was all that great an offering. If all you do is improve security a little bit, it's not worth swapping browsers out, without a doubt. We have an extension for that, right? And you could just use that. When you really say, okay, now I want to improve the way the world works. I want to reduce the technology stack that it takes to support a knowledge worker. I want to make a knowledge worker more productive, and I want to do so securely. That's a real effort. And you don't get that with a $100 million purchase of a company doing $1 million or $2 million ARR. That is a long, long effort. And we still stand alone in that. We haven't lost a technical head-to-head in years. And so it is a different game. Doesn't mean we get to every customer. There's a lot of customers out there, but the world has expanded. That enterprise browser now, what it really means is all compute on the endpoint. We're outside the browser. We run on everything that runs on that laptop of yours. That's the space we now operate and govern.
The world does expand, and it's interesting that you said it because Island, you started it back in beginning of 2020, much before the AI era started, and then the AI era indeed started and just changed the whole name of the game, as they say. But in terms of maybe adoption, did it meaningfully change your product roadmap in terms of, suddenly there is all the LLMs out there, leakage of information, etc.?
It wasn't that big a surprise, to be clear. AI was coming. One of our investors, Georgian, has an entire AI discipline with an AI lab that they had from the first dollar they ever gave us working with us. Its explosive size was a surprise. We didn't see that coming, but it's AI being important and a fundamental premise of the future. I think a lot of us saw that. We definitely saw that 6 years ago, not at the scale that we are. Like envisioning an Anthropic was not something I wish I could have seen, right? But definitely did not. So what it's done for us, though, is it's allowed us to take this wonderful thing we've done. So going back to the core premise of the word enterprise, for us, the reason we use the word enterprise browser, not secure browser, just browser, is it's the knowledge worker, the IT stack, and the security. So now you think about AI. What is AI? It's an agentic worker. It's an agentic capability. It needs capabilities. It needs an IT stack. It needs security. And it turns out what we built is exactly the premise that needs as well. So that allowed us to go into the AI Protect offering. So you want to have AI. How do you protect it in all directions? How do you make sure AI doesn't do what you don't want it to do? How do you make sure your users don't use it in a way you don't want them to? How do you control that? That was interesting, and that's a compelling part. But the mistake cybersecurity often makes is we focus on that last part. So now if you want to find a buyer, it has to be a company that has rolled out AI, is grappling with security challenges, and now looking for an answer. We saw, let's move our offering forward. So we start to build things that help AI be successful to the knowledge worker. So we built AI Publish. This is the idea. You can take that replit, that lovable code, anything, and literally push it down to the user in a safe way. Put it in a container. Now it can run. We can move things quicker. So now a vibe coder over in accounting can push out an agent inside an important organization to everybody in it without risk. Where normally that's security review, pipeline processes, all the things that don't scream next generation. Then the idea of how do you inject AI into existing processes is part of that presentation layer. You've got an existing application. You want to have AI play a part in some of it. You're not ready to rewrite the whole thing. How do you swap it out? So we at the presentation layer, we can take that button to maybe create a new customer and call a whole AI sequence that does the work for that with a headless browser off to another environment, all while you manage that process. So again, how do you get it out? Then there's the whole access to train. We see the end users in a way nobody else does. We know everything they're doing. So much like you've seen on news where you see people wearing the robotic hands working in a factory to train a robot, we can do that digitally for our call center, for our front desk workforce. All of those things we can capture in a way AI loves. Screenshots with enriched data so that it can learn, grow, and thrive. So now we're being pulled forward to companies say, we want to embrace AI. We want to do more with it. Let's get Island in here. And oh yeah, we're going to protect it, but we got to get it out to everybody. We need everybody to use it. We need to learn. We need to train. So that's been this concept of that word enterprise, and not just security, not just end user experience, the idea of the triumvirate. It is amazingly viable in the AI generation.
I agree. You definitely need to embrace AI if you don't want to miss the train, right? But do you think it's possible to have a protective, sensitive data while still allowing the employee to be productive in the same way? Or is it sort of like a trade-off between the two?
I think it is very viable to have a safe AI interaction. You know, one of the things that frustrates me, and we've dedicated Island to approaching this differently. At Island, we're using AI to win. AI is not the boogeyman. It's not the bad thing. Mythos was the first touch of AI to cybersecurity, and that was unfortunate because, well, it's an amazing product, don't get me wrong, but it was unfortunate because it exposed vulnerabilities. It exposed attack surfaces that we didn't want exposed, right? We wish weren't out there. That gets people thinking about AI, and then they think about data upload and all of that. And it's typical old cybersecurity approach. Mobile phone shows up. Oh, how can that be bad? Instead, in this case, we're going, it's the answer. You know, put physical analogy. I think you would agree if there's a police officer out in front of every door in a city, that city'd be safer. You can't afford it. If you could monitor every traffic light and understand everything going on, you can help traffic patterns and solve easy problems, but you can't. But with AI, you can. And so we want to be the leaders in bringing AI to solve the problem, where AI is the answer, not the problem, not the thing you have to protect against, not the thing you have to put rubber, guardrails around, but how are you going to deliver policy-less protection at scale? To do that, you need to see everything that's going on, not reduce it. And that's a fundamental change in cybersecurity. Every product built till now was about reducing data. If I'm going to go to a SIM, all this data comes in. The money was spent on how do I collect the data, and then how do I shrink it so I can see the one or two things I have to pay attention to. That's not what we want to do with AI. With AI, we wanted to see the whole thing. I got to sit through an amazing presentation by two companies, and they were hired to essentially build AI drone pilots. And the first way they did it was they trained them like an Air Force pilot. They put them through the Air Force pilot training process. And then they flew missions, and it worked. Another one, they said, don't train it. Let it fight itself. Let it go. That model was far superior. This is what we have to do with AI. It is not trying to get it to take the way we used to do it and force it now to be done in some automated fashion. We want to give it the data. We want to let it run on those IOCs. We want to let it see the world and come back with its findings. And if we do that right, we could fundamentally have the first dramatic systemic shift in our ability to defend ourselves. I think in the next 5 years, we will fundamentally change the risk of being breached by embracing AI. And all the talk right now is how AI is the boogeyman. It is not helpful. We need to go to the next stage.
And you mentioned all the drone pilots. So it's interesting. I think I read it as well. So basically, the first option that you mentioned is just like constrained by humans that wrote the manuals. But then if you don't be constrained, so you can get to a whole new realm of innovation. And okay, you mentioned also the boogeyman. So we got to speak about Mythos, right? So do you think Mythos was genuinely a technological milestone, or was it a marketing stunt from Anthropic? Sort of like, okay, we are strong, we are going to go public, and you should know that we are strong. So
Listen, they found 0 days in some very important technology. They found stuff that impacts national security in a real way. To write it off as a marketing stunt would be unfair. Now, did they play it up for the benefit of Anthropic brand? Sure. Did they roll it out in a way to monetize it really well? Yes. Good on them. That's what they're supposed to do. But they did deliver real tech that matters to the world. And to be frank, it's going to come from a lot of places. That's the crazy thing about these models. I don't think we fully understand what their mode is yet. And maybe they do, but I don't think we do. And so why won't there be another model that maybe finds different things? And I always take AI back to very much like a human, right? We've got brilliant experts. You know, Einstein saw one part of the world of physics that another person didn't see. Somebody else saw that. I think we'll see multiple models running with different contexts given to them that discover fundamentally amazing things for the betterment and the detriment of organizations. Mythos is the first taste of that.
it is the first taste of it. And when we think about the potential of weaponization of it, right, to weaponize vulnerability at unprecedented speed. So essentially, the timeline between the discovery and exploitation is just like shrinking more and more. But do you think that the enterprise browser is sort of like the last realm of defense and the effective line of defense against potential vulnerabilities?
So I agree with the theme of your question, not last line, first line. And here's how it's working out. So some of the largest banks in the world are doing this already. They're sitting there going, okay, I can't patch at a speed appropriate to shut down what Mythos is finding. I'm in 80 countries and I run the world's GDP on me. Literally, banking countries can work together because we exist. If I mess that up, we grind countries to a halt. So the idea of rapidly patching just because a vulnerability was found, impacting the availability of those resources, is just not something they can grapple with. So what do? They're going, okay, we have to fix that. We will fix that. We will get to those. We will solve those. We will do that. But we don't want to have to knee-jerk reaction to that. So we're going to look to our perimeter. And at the perimeter, can we apply a virtual patch, a compensating control that will allow us to live with that vulnerability for a little bit? The analogy I like to use is the lock on my office door is broken. Let's go make sure the lock on the front door is right and make sure nobody can get in that's not an employee. You know, it doesn't solve everything, but it does give a level of acceptable risk for it. So Island, from the start, we built it to be fully API driven. Everything that happens in the browser is API driven. It's very unique to us. Everything can be driven by direct code, 100%. So that allows somebody to go, okay, I'm going to build an automated system with AI that tells my perimeter how to reply to this vulnerability. What can I do on the perimeter to do that? And that's a beautiful thing. You could take Mythos, which found a vulnerability, we don't know how, apply another AI engine that says, well, how do I limit that with these perimeter controls? And it can respond. So when it responds, if it sends out the commands to that, you can accept those commands, all of a sudden you are a fundamental part of the infrastructure to do that. And in cybersecurity, as well as probably everywhere else in software, all that will remain are primary data providers, the things that produce data, the infrastructure that it takes to run our environments, and things that are part of the AI sequencing chains, whether it's the AI direct or the AI response plane. Island were all three. And it's a very unique place to be. And I wish I could tell you when we sat down 6 years ago, we said, let's build something like this and came up with the idea of Island. But it's just evolved and the world has shifted to the value of the endpoint is so much more important today than it was 3 years ago. And being the disruptor on that endpoint is an enviable place to be. And we'll see challengers and people chase us, but it's hard work. They're going to have to invest a lot, billions to catch us.
It's definitely interesting because AI at the end started as a sort of like a funny thing that you could write songs with rhymes, and then now it's reshaping all the enterprise security, right? But could quantum actually be the next frontier of innovation, sort of like a judgment day for cybersecurity? How do you see it from your standpoint? Is it something that's been discussed in the industry or not necessarily?
What a great question. I would say the quantum Armageddon, as it's called. And I hate being the fear-mongering guy, but I don't believe this is fear-mongering because it's just fact. The moved up, it was 2036, now it's 2029. And what that Armageddon day is when will quantum compute be available to adversaries that can break the encryption and it basically see inside our most important conversations? So the way we've thought about cyber, or the way we've thought about security, we encrypt our communications. We encrypt our communications. We don't block who can get in the middle of them. That pipe that runs across the ocean, we know people can see inside that, but can they unencrypt what's in there? And we've had confidence around our encryption levels protecting that. When quantum's available, it rips through that encryption and turns it all into plain text. So now we'll see banking information, we'll see critical information, we'll see secrets and passwords, and everything else is now available in clear text. That is horrifying. That is true technical Armageddon. That's a lot scarier than Mythos showing up. So you have to start to say, okay, we have to engage in quantum encryption. That's not that bad. We can live with that. But what does it do? When my browser spins up a connection to a server somewhere else at a quantum encrypt level, the idea that you're going to get in the middle of that stream, break it at line speed, look inside of it, close it back again, and send it on its way just doesn't measure up to common sense. So what does every large network maker do next? How is their gear? Because their gear got valuable because it moved from switching and routing to insightful information. Well, it's only insightful if we can see the traffic. It's not insightful. It goes dead soon. So you have to move all those controls to pre and post encryption. Who's pre? We are. Who's post? Amazon, Google, Microsoft, those things. That's where the controls now have to go. Sitting in the middle is an antiquated thought process. And you think about almost every major cyber company has a very important set of product lines that does that. When that disappears, their EPS hits, the value of those companies drop, and they're going to find a fun game ahead of them. It's a very interesting time in cyber to figure out how quantum works. And unfortunately, the word quantum got associated with, sci-fi and never going to be here. And it's, so I think a lot of people wrote it off. Meanwhile, those in the know it is real and it is coming and it is coming fast. And then just to kind of round out your question, if you take AI into quantum compute with a self-learning capability, good night. It'll be really interesting to see what happens next.
Game over, as they say, right?
It'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely. And I guess the one that will be in the front row seats going to be the CISOs of the world, right? Because now there is the AI. Maybe there will be soon enough the quantum computing. So how do you think actually the role of CISOs is evolving? I mean, could the position itself be fundamentally transformed in the next couple of years or maybe even the next 5 years?
I think it does transform, but I think the CISO community, cybersecurity has always been this weird thing. I didn't start from cyber. And when I joined it, I was behind the other cyber guys by about a year. Your knowledge in cyber gets you about a year ahead of somebody not in cyber because it changes so fast. To be good at cyber, you're constantly learning, you're constantly staying on top of things. And so the CISOs we have now that are good, the really good ones, they have made a career of learning. They're actually some of the best positioned people to take on this next generation topic because they've been learning. Many of our other roles in IT have been able to do the same thing for a decade. And so they might be a little out of practice of reinventing themselves and relearning, where our CISO community by default is always on the cutting edge. CISOs meet with startups not because they get talked into it, because they want to understand the cutting edge of everything, because they know that's their future to deal with. That mentality sets those up. The CISOs I work with are going to become CIOs. They're going to become the leaders of this next generation because they have been able to learn as a fundamental premise. That's how they got their job. Constant learning. And that's where we're at now. What you knew about IT 12 months ago is almost irrelevant. It's what is the next 12 months? And more importantly, what does the next 24 months look like? So all of us have to reshape ourselves fundamentally. And that gives opportunities to those of us that can learn quickly, can assemble information and put it to use. And it puts challenges for those that have gathered their information over a slow growth period. It is something in security we've had to become great at, and the best CISOs are.
They definitely are. And I actually have a bunch of more questions about it. But sadly, we have to move on. And I do have one last question before I pass the mic to Senat. So one of the most relevant subject today, tokenmaxxing, right? People and employees spending millions of dollars on tokens, writing and building agents, right? But is a complete data security still realistic goal? And a follow-up going to be about what's happening if the actually agents go rogue? And in terms of like data leakage, how does the island take it into account?
The token spend, yes, it's gotten out of hand in some organizations. Token optimization has not shown up yet. I built an agent recently that consumed tokens. I enjoyed what it did, and then met with one of my developers. We tweaked it a little bit, and all of a sudden it didn't even consume a token. I wasn't educated into the ways to do that. I send Claude 20 PDFs on topics I want to go through. I don't run it through a markup language creator, right? I don't Swift it. When you do that, that's 70% less token usage. We are all learning how to do this and do this right. The aggressive spend is, and I do this in my own org, I'd rather you using AI right now and fighting your way through it and wasting money on it where we could have optimized it for you than have a slow rollout. Because unlike going to cloud, unlike going to mobile, which were other big changes, this one is all about competitive. My customer didn't know if I was an Amazon or my own data center. It changed my economics. It didn't change my ability to compete. This does. And in business, winning comes first, optimization comes second. These companies are trying to win. They'll optimize next. It's a natural path. On the data exploitation, the discovery, it's actually pretty easy to manage at the end of the day. The models work with you. If you have control over your last mile, which is the challenge, and most people don't, but if you get control over your last mile, you can make sure corporate information stays in closed models, stays in your models, doesn't go to public models. You can do things of data abstraction and all these other items to it, and AI can help you with that. Most of people's interference or experience with AI is a single experience under a single outcome. Take how we do development. Our development here, 90+% of our code goes through. That doesn't mean we sit at Claude and Claude writes it and we say, thank you. We write it. We run a judge against it. The judge tests it, validates that it's there. We run another one to make sure there's not a security issue. All three models have to be in sync and work, and they're all three independent versions of that. So while an agent can go rogue, if you build it correctly, there's another agent watching its behavior, watching what it's doing, and is it living up to it? So when you put through a real pipeline, not you and I playing on our desktop, but a real pipeline to do an agent, that agent will produce a dossier, a statement about what it does. I built an agent to look up, in Salesforce, who has what account, what have they spent, what are they doing? Okay, when you build that agent, great. Now the agent should tell you, I only need to connect to Salesforce. I need to connect to this Salesforce. This is the data I need. Here's where it goes. Here's the networking required. And here's the expectation digital experience. Great. If you have that, then you go put control points around that. Only go here. I'll give you the credentials when you go there. You don't need to know them, so you can't go anywhere else. I'll control the data boundary. So you set all that up and you naturally have a very efficient, thoughtful, safe environment. That's the reality of the future. Not I wrote a prompt, did something silly, and that goes through. That's our moment in time of learning how to work with this, amazing technology. We're not writing prompts. The front desk workers at Marriott aren't writing prompts in the future, right? Your call center workers aren't writing prompts. Honestly, most of us aren't. It'll be a select few that do, and the rest interact. And that's where the economies of scale come in. So I think most companies are starting to come to grips with this. It's security's job when new tech comes up to scare the shit out of everybody. That is not what we need to do here. This is manageable. We can handle it. Yes, you do need control the last mile. That's what we do. Great. It's not hard to deploy us. It's easy to get out there. Once you have control over that, AI can be just a wonderful playground to try, grow, and essentially compete.
Interesting time to say the least, and looking forward to it indeed. And Mike, thank you so much. And Sanat, without further ado, the floor is yours. Take us home.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us and giving some of the thoughtful answers. You might have already touched upon this around Island's push to the agentic layer as well as rogue agents. Everyone talks about AI as a productivity tool. What do cybersecurity leaders still underestimate about AI's impact today, in your opinion?
What's being underestimated? I think this idea that we need to solve a problem is one. Like we've got some cybersecurity ones. Oh, I need an answer for Claude Cowork, as if that's all they're going to deal with, And instead of asking the bigger question, I need an answer for data control for this layer. I need an answer for network control at this layer. Claude Cowork is your first taste, right? It would be like the first SaaS app being Salesforce and saying, all right, I got to figure Salesforce out. Like there's not 95 others coming 6 months later. So when we think about this, as powerful as Anthropic is and as great as they are, even Anthropic has multiple models. Even Anthropic has multiple stuff, right? We're going to be in a world where we're going to need to have dexterity of control. We're going to need to be nimble, and we need to think about our control layers not at a response product layer, but at a functionality layer. So it's almost like we need to go research Swiss Army knives. Then how do we cut this one thing? I think that might be the area some miss out on. Maybe they don't miss it. They're just reacting to what they have to deal with at the moment. They know it. They'll get there. But that's probably the biggest hole. And I do think some of it's overstated as far as the hallucinations and things like that. Hallucinations are hilarious to me. The number of bad decisions made by humans is so great. The fact you can trick an AI into making a couple bad decisions and you want to doom the product for it cracks me up. It's all context, right? Bad decisions, just like with humans, are made from not enough data, too much data, or bad data. Same goes with AI. And, a basic test that you should run that most people aren't is you go in, you build your model, you do your activity, then destroy it, rebuild it. If you get the same outcome, you provided the same context. If you didn't, you have context coming from somewhere you didn't know. Owning that context layer and making sure you have an audited context layer that you understand why and what it's for and why it's there. I think that is something that is either cyber or IT will have to start to grapple with, but that will be part of the art form of AI long-term viability and greatness.
Makes sense. And it's really nice to see how you think of hallucinations and seeing AI from a net positive, which is always really nice for the AI in the development community. Moving more to the economics of it, as token consumption explodes and employees run multiple agents at the same time, we can kind of see how this AI spending is becoming a significant cost. How do organizations like yours audit, govern, and sort of optimize this usage without slowing down innovation?
First and foremost, theoretically, AI can help everywhere, right? Theoretically. But where do we need its help first? Where is it most positioned to win? Code development was a great starting point. The ROI around code development cannot be unseen. It's great, right? It is amazing. Like at Island, we'd love to have 800 engineers. We have 300 now. I'd love 800. So AI showing up just got more out of a group of people that I wanted more of, right? So there's no reason for me to back off, but it does reduce the need to get to 800. Now maybe I only need to get to 600, right? And that's great. These larger organizations that will have a cost reduction shift should go get those. And that's key. Running it through a whole company randomly guarantees you'll have overspend, but it also could mean that your company is AI centric, which might be your competitive advantage long term. So I think there's a trade there. Every project though needs to start just like they always did. If this works, if we get this productivity improvement, how will it manifest? How do we get our costs back? How do we get that win? Now, I think for the good of mankind, it's lucky we're hitting these price barriers. It's, if you think about it, we don't have enough compute, we don't have enough power. Where do we want that run? I want it run on cancer research. I want it run on financial models. I want it run on innovation, things that'll make, your nation great, your company great. I'm not really jumping for it to take my order at McDonald's yet. Like it's nice it could do that, but if we're short on power, don't use it for that. So I think that'll allow us to not have all the jobs shift dramatically too fast. There's a blessing hidden in there that's really important. And we might even look long-term to providing a tax structure to help incent that behavior. So there's a soft landing for the jobs that can be replaced. But the research that really will change the world, that'll accomplish Elon's mission to put us all on Mars and everywhere else, that stuff gets to run as fast as humanly possible. And I think this cost scenario, as it starts to land, will be interesting. Letting things run unchecked. You see these, I won't call out which company, but comes out and says, we spent our whole token budget in the first 3 months. How'd you not see that in the first 10 days? Like, why weren't you noticing that spend? It didn't, you don't spend a year's worth of stuff in 3 months and not notice it till the 3 month and a day marker. This is stuff as a CEO you got to monitor now. I know our token usage. I know what teams are doing with it. I monitor it. Those that are spending tokens misaligned to productivity gains that we're expecting, you got to address.
AI is obviously changing software development with coding, product management, and a lot of different roles like product design. How have these roles changed the island, and have they changed meaningfully over the past few years, and where do you kind of see it going?
Building that perfect iPhone, when we first got your hands on an iPhone, you just felt different, right? It was a great design. It was really well-designed product. There are some cars out there, you get them like, wow, this is really well thought out. That brilliance is still there. That brilliance is still required. The difference is they can iterate faster. They can drive to their brilliance faster. I've got a buddy, we play cards, and he built an app for scoring our card game. The first rev had problems, didn't do everything we wanted it to do. The second rev, he had me test, perfect. By the time we went to play, he made a third rev. That thing was freaking horrific. It was guiding us, it was doing stuff, it was terrible. It was absolutely a horrible experience to be on. He over-engineered it. He over-tinkered it. He lost his way on that. AI will do what you tell it. If you tell it to make a monstrosity, it will make a monstrosity. If you have a beautiful vision of what can occur, you can guide it to the beautiful vision. So I would say the truly great product designers, the truly great developers that understand architecture and optimization, they're greater. They get to be greater. The people that we had that weren't truly great, that were mainly executing on somebody else's vision, if you will, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, they're going to have to retool. That's not there. And so in our case, we had a very high bar for hiring engineering talent. Very high. Most of the people we talked to couldn't cross it. So for us, those engineers are now unlocked. They're able to run faster, harder, be amazing. If you thought 10 engineers is better than one, so rather than paying one a big price tag, let's get 10 cheap ones, you're now staring at that going, what do you do? Why do I have you? How does this fit in? But if you hire people that are architect level, that are brilliant, man, it didn't change their job. It made the part you were paying for all you pay for. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I look at these expensive architects I have, they're big dollar figures. The fact that they spent time debugging code, they spent time typing, all that stuff, man, that's just not what I was paying for. I was paying for the brilliant ideas. Now they spend all day on that. It's awesome. Nice. It is a fundamental change. So yeah, the world has changed, but not for the great. The really great, they're now the happiest people you have. They now spend all day on what differentiates them from the rest of the world.
Very cool. Moving more towards engineering and leadership. So a little bit about you. You went from physics to cybersecurity. How's your academic background in engineering physics influenced the way you approach cybersecurity and problem solving today, especially as a CEO?
Yeah, I really enjoyed physics. I enjoyed engineering a lot. I thought I would go off and do that. When I got my hands on code, though, I couldn't give it up. It was so rewarding to work with. But what that degree taught me, one was it gave me confidence. I can always say whatever I'm looking at, it's not quantum physics, you know, like, okay, you gotta touch Claude for their first time. All right, it's not quantum physics. I'll figure it out. Right. It's at the end of the day, there's very few things that require the mental capacity of something like a quantum physics. And I got to tell you, I read the research occurring there today, and I just continue to just be amazed at the individuals that can think on that plane. It's a phenomenal thing. So it taught me how to broaden my thinking, taught me how to learn, taught me how to respond. But the scientific process for understanding data, for getting to the root cause of items, that is huge. I'll get a presentation with all sorts of metrics in there, and people will tell me how everything's going to be great and what's going to occur. And I'll be able to work back and say, okay, what are the assumptions we have to do to validate that? That's all physics. My college did something amazing for me. Two of our instructors would have you guess the answer before you work the problem. And that is a skill that I wish everybody would learn. And because you start to get to think, cars moving at this speed. This is going this speed. What happens? Well, you're like, okay, well, I mean, it's got to be roughly in this zone, right? When you start to understand that, especially as a CEO, and you start to be able to look at things and understand, okay, I expect it to roughly be in that area. Now you can start to understand what is wrong with your assumption when it's not. What did you not understand? What was missing from your analysis? So you don't have to run everything to ground. You get to stay at that. So that's what that taught me, was how to understand data, how to understand environmental variables and put that together. That was really critical. The jump to cyber was 100% of an accident, though.
Very nice. It sounds like through your experiences, your academic experiences, and your professional experiences, you've obviously developed a very strong intuition, both for the space and for physics. Speaking of space, well, we know your biggest dream was to be an astronaut. Full credits to Yossi for doing all the research here.
Yes.
We see SpaceX IPO, data centers in space are gaining ground. Do you expect cybersecurity architectures to look fundamentally different from those on Earth that we see today for the data centers?
That's a great question. I hadn't really thought about cybersecurity going there. In order for us to adopt space-based data centers, they're going to have to resemble the current ones, or we won't be able to adopt them that fast, right? So I don't think that will be that different. But if you start to think about Mars and you start to think about some of these areas, you now have to retrench into at a distance guidance, right? So I think what we're doing with AI, and you look at it, and I was commenting on how focused Elon Musk is on his goal. You got a guy that's figuring out electric power, he's figuring out robots, AI to accompany them, spaceships to take them, boring companies to build. Like, it's all one thought process of what's actually going to happen on the other side. We've got to do the same with cyber. You're not going to be able to talk to it every day. It's going to have to be autonomous. It's going to have to be able to operate. It's going to have the collective wisdom of all our time. All those things will have to occur so you can put something out into space and let it go. I welcome the opportunity someday to debate how to do that. Luckily, that's not what's being asked of me at the moment, but that's going to be a really fun process someday.
Very cool. Moving more towards a different type of question. If you had access to a genie that could answer any question with complete accuracy, what would you ask?
Wow. I mean, there's a selfish thing of like what stock to bet on, right? And you get there. Wow, if I had a genie, what would I ask and get complete accuracy?
Anything around knowledge?
I would love to extend life out. I would love to be able to give our loved ones the ability to spend hundreds of years around. So I think understanding the keys to unlocking longevity would be absolutely interesting. I've focused on it in my own life on how to unlock longevity, but I'm measuring it in years, right? I would love to be in a scenario where we're talking about additional decades and the like. Imagine if that favorite, grandmother of yours could be around forever. Like, that kind of stuff would be absolutely amazing to learn.
I think they might be working on it actually, so it could happen.
They're working. I hope they win. I hope they succeed.
Who has been the most influential mentor in your career, and what piece of advice have they given you that you still hold with you today and still carry?
Wow. There's a couple. I had one that was a sales leader, and In sales, which is a big part of a CEO's job, it's probably the biggest. After you figure out the product, there's lots of people that come in and can build your product and help take it to the next level, but selling it is a key concept. Sales in software used to be, and is in some places, this saber rattling, do it or you're fired, yell, 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 boiler room kind of silliness. And I got to see a kind-hearted human do it right. And that was Joe Sexton. The way he led, the way he supported people, what he built was a generational set of followers. So as he rolled from one company to another, he was able to bring not just his skills, but an army to him. And when I left McAfee and went to Blue Coat, almost 300 people followed me there and go to market. That instantly changed the capability of that company to succeed. That was learning from him. How to run a sales org that takes A players and makes them A+. There's a couple books out there by some pretty big experts that'll teach you how to take a B player and make them a B+. But if you do that, you run off your A's. And I won't call it out because I don't need to start a war over it, but one of the bigger books about, startups prescribes to that. Beat the shit out of your people till they do what you tell them to do. But the best don't want that. The best want you to enable them. They're going to work harder than you would ever dream. Enable them. Don't get in their way. So that was part. So I learned that from Joe. And then Greg Clark, now at Crosspoint Capital, CEO Blue Coats, Mantech, and a bunch of other stuff. He taught me the economic side. He's a brilliant engineer, but he really understood the financials, how to build a company, how M&A works, how it fails, how you can grow that way, what you can do with your balance sheet, how you can use that power. And before I ran into him, cybersecurity was about the bad guy, do better at solving the bad guy, charge as much as you can, and hope the numbers work out. And in order to build something truly differentiating, you need to have good economics. And he taught me that truly the art of being the CEO, not just the leader. And those two, I'd probably jump up to the top, but there's been so many. I mean, I've worked for amazing CEOs, the CEOs at McAfee along the way, the sales leaders there, engineering leaders. I've been so blessed. I've been at the right place at the right time to receive just amazing mentorship. And there's probably 30 people I could point out that I still call all the time and get advice from, and they get advice from me. I'm on their boards, they're on mine. It's just it's a life worth living when you have that.
If you could have coffee with anyone, past or present, who would it be? Would it be any one of them or someone else you think?
I would love to have gotten to talk to Einstein. I would love to talk to Elon Musk. Elon, I think, is a very special human. We may or may not agree with everything he does, and that's not my view. I'm not here to prop him up, but you are talking about a very interesting mind that looks at problems in a very unique way and has a nice path. I think you could learn from that. Warren Buffett's an amazing human that I would love to learn from. I got to have I used to say Colin Powell, but I got to do that. And Colin Powell was, to me, one of the biggest impacts that I had on my leadership journey was hearing how he was a leader and that what he saw leadership and his requirements for leadership. For me, when I have a new leader, it starts with Colin Powell. Learn his wisdom, start there. Don't pass go till you do. That dude was a force of good for the country and for the world. And he's just a brilliant, brilliant guy doing the right thing. I love meeting with him.
Super interesting. Last question from me before I hand it over to Yossi. You're a big soccer fan. You mentioned England, Croatia. What's your favorite football team for this World Cup?
Oh, for this World Cup? Oh boy, I can't follow it well enough from the States to be able to understand how the players disseminate back to the various countries. Like, I'm always shocked when there's some small country that is a great team and it's because they've got 10 premier players, right? But I've got a lot of friends and a lot of good customers that are from England. And so I'm going with them tomorrow to the game. Nice. So I'll be rooting for England. But right now, the United States is in it. So until they're out of it, they're my team.
Very cool. I think the stadium has AC, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
It does. It does. They'll shut the roof. Dallas is one of the more refined areas you could ever live. It's a great status of living. It's an amazing environment to be in, and the stadium represents that. It's one of the best stadiums in the world. To have FIFA here and have these games here, just what a great fit.
Very cool. I really enjoyed this. Yossi, want to take it?
So last questions, maybe the hardest one of them all. What is your favorite movie of all time? Is it Interstellar, something about cyber, or?
It's a series of movies. You can't look past The Godfather. It is so well done. It is so entrenching, but yeah, it's a hard decision. I love Star Wars. I like Blazing Saddles for comedy. That's an old movie I used to watch with my dad. But yeah, Godfather is the epitome of filmmaking to me.
Did you like the third one though?
I actually like them all. Yeah, the third was, not on the same kind of path as the others, but
Yeah.
I love it when you take a character through its transition. I like to see the characters play out. I love it when the movie ends and it tells us what happened to the characters. I like to see it all end up. Like the Sopranos ending just made me very angry, right? It just went dark. Now, we've since learned what happened, but I like the clarity of that. I want to know what happened to all the other characters. So I like how The Godfather kind of took a lot of the past to the end there. So yeah, I appreciate the third. First and second were better, but yeah, the third was valuable to me.
Absolutely. I agree. It was actually a good one. The only thing they released it in a 1 decade after the second one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I guess it didn't help. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a joy hosting you and sort of like a closure after we hosted the great Dan Amiga about not a decade ago, about a year ago. So it was fun.
He is a legend. I am lucky man to work with him. He is the best in the business and he teaches me stuff every day. I love that guy.
So thank you so much. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other interesting episodes from the president of Cisco and others, so stay tuned.